Hobart, we have a wonderful gentleman from Denmark.
Yes, so I'll take over here again as moderator and welcome Dr. Ole Bjerg, who among some of people that have been introduced to, let's say, continental philosophy is one of their favorites. So if you're interested in Jacques Lacan and Slavoj Žižek and Heidegger and the ontological the question of the ontological status of money, Ole Bjerg is kind of your go-to guy, especially this book by him, Ole Bjerg, Making Money, The Philosophy of Crisis Capitalism. And also, I just digested this one because of the importance to COP26, Parallax of Growth, subtitled The Philosophy of Ecology and Economy. Ole Bjerg is a professor at the department, and this is kind of an interesting department because they put together management, politics, and philosophy. That's quite a conflation of disciplines, very interestingly. He's then, of course, the author of these two books, and he's one of the few people that has given a TED Talk. And we'll make that available one way or another of 15 minutes, just explaining what money can do. So I give him the floor, and the title of his presentation is Money and Sovereignty, or Why I Changed My Mind on Central Bank Digital Currencies. Professor Bjerg, very welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Govert. That was a very generous introduction. Yeah, I'm really happy for this opportunity to speak. I'm also happy to follow on from Joseph, partly because the theme I'm going to speak to kind of just, yeah, fits nicely into what Joseph has said. And then secondly, also just because I'm really inspired by Joseph's work. I also have all kinds of notes in this book that I've read 3 times. So yeah, so that's really nice. And so what I'm going to do, I want to share sort of my current thoughts on CBDC. And I will say, as a bit of a disclaimer, this is something I'm still in the process of thinking about it. So I hope you will, yeah. It's kind of open, it's an open question to me. And the background is that I've been working on this issue of money for at least 10 years. If you also count my work on poker and gambling, which I think you could, as this has also something to do with money, it's more than 10 years. And next to that, I've also been involved in the monetary reform movement that Patricio is also part of and Huber is also part of. And for a long time, I've sort of very much been in favor of central bank digital currencies because I saw it, or I've seen it, as like a stepping stone towards a proper monetary reform. But I will say that in recent years, no, I will say what has happened in this work is that I was going to say we've been vindicated. That's probably exaggerating a little bit, but I will say that in the beginning, when I started working on this and also speaking publicly about this, some people would think I was crazy, like, oh, banks create money, you must be out of your mind, you're not a real economist, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a communist, and I've had all kinds of stuff thrown at me. So, but I feel that now this point has kind of seeped into the mainstream. At least people are not calling me bad names anymore. And a little bit with the same thing with this central bank digital currency. In the beginning, that was also like, oh, this utopian idea is never going to happen. And right now, central banks, as Joseph said, they are in the process of implementing this. So you would think that I would just be like, yeah, way to go. But there's something in me where I'm kind of, I'm starting to doubt this. I still stand by the theory and the diagnosis and the analysis of the problems of the contemporary monetary system that I share with Joseph and also with Steve. Yeah, it's more what is then the solution, and is for me, just personally, it's become impossible for me to sort of wholeheartedly support central bank digital currencies. And to the extent that I helped start the monetary reform organization here in Denmark, Gode Penge, but I've actually left that organization. I'm friends with them, and it's good. They're doing good work, and there's no, but yeah. So that's kind of what I want to open here. What am I? Why? Where am I now? And what am I thinking? And as Govert said, I have this privilege of being able to work in this field of philosophy and economics and so forth. And I think what I'm going to talk about here is probably going to be a little bit more philosophical than what I sometimes say. One thing I really liked about Joseph's work is that he puts this word sovereignty at the forefront. And as I've thought about sort of what is it that drives me in this work on monetary reform, I come to the conclusion that it's two values. One of them is truth, and the other one is sovereignty. That's kind of what's been driving my work on money and monetary reform. First of all, I think we should have like a proper, true understanding of the economy. So we need to understand it. That has to be with true. But also the reason why, the primary reason for me why I want to change the monetary system is because I want more sovereignty. I think I love sovereignty. I love to be sovereign. So I want a monetary system that kind of supports that. I will say for the past 2 years, for the past 2 years, I've experienced that both of these values have been under immense pressure. And I've experienced that in society at large, but I've also experienced it in sort of my personal life. And I'm sure I share that experience with many of you. The good thing about sort of experience these kinds of pressures is that also it provides a learning opportunity. And I've certainly learned a lot over the last 2 years about truth and especially about sovereignty. And one of the things I've learned, one of the things I've been thinking about is the difference between freedom and sovereignty. Sometimes we conflate them, but I think they are, I actually think they're different. So I'm going to say what I mean by freedom. I've come to realize, or at least that's how I think. Freedom is something that we get from systems. So systems provide us with freedoms. They give us freedom. So take the political system, it will give us rights, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom to elect the government, politician, and so forth. Education system that I'm a part of, I'm happy to see one of my students is here. So the education system, especially in my country, kind of gives free education and freedom for people to study whatever they like. Health system gives us freedom or free access to healthcare. And also the economic system and the monetary system, it gives us a freedom to accumulate wealth. That's one of the functions of money, is that it gives us that. And it also gives us a freedom to spend our money on whatever we like. So in that sense, we can have a lot of freedom, and freedom, don't get me wrong, freedom is nice. It's better to be free than not to be free. However, there's the downside of freedom, or the sort of the shadow of freedom, is that it makes you, or all these freedoms that we get, we are still dependent on the system. Because insofar as we've been given these freedoms from the system also has the power to take them away. And that's what I've experienced, and I think I share that with many of you. We've experienced how some of the freedoms that we took for granted have been taken away, just like basic freedoms to move around or all kinds of stuff. At least that's been my experience. So I want to go, I'll talk about sovereignty in a minute, but I want to say a little bit about central bank digital currencies and monetary reform. So my original idea was that if we could move the money creation from the commercial bank to the central banks, we would get more freedom. But the Achilles heel of this, I always thought, was the central bank, because we were kind of taking powers from commercial banks and giving it to central banks. And that raises a number of questions, like, so who actually controls the central banks? And how, if we were to give these powers to the central bank, how would they use these powers? And I'm Another great economist that I'm inspired by is Richard Werner, that many of you probably also know. And he's had this for a very long time. He's had this skepticism about central banks. And I will say that in that respect, I probably moved closer to Werner over the last 2 years. And I used to think like this. I used to think, well, yeah, I know central banks are not perfect, but at least they're better than the commercial banks. It can't be worse. And I will say this, I think I've come to realize, I think it can get worse. I really think it can get worse than what we have today. And I'll say, so my concern here is it's based very much on, what has happened in governments and in central bank over the past 2 years. And my concerns are like twofold. The first one, the whole idea for me of a monetary reform would be to like end or reverse some of the monetary policies that are going on right now. Like we have like massive money creation, commercial banks, and now aided also by quantitative easing and central banks. And our idea that I share with many monetary reformers was that we could then start controlling the money supply and end it. I fear, or I don't fear because I'm not afraid, but I will have the concern that implementing central bank digital currency in the existing in the existing system would just be a means to accelerate this development. I truly, yeah, that's my concern, is that that's actually what's driving some of these efforts in central banks. Is not that they want something else than what we have. They just want to keep going even further. And also maybe they want to keep us, like the money users, they want to keep us locked in so that even when the system collapses, there's nowhere else for us to go. That's my first concern. And the second concern has to do, maybe the first concern has to do with money as a store of value, and the second one here has to do with money as a medium of exchange. Because I fear, or I'm not going to use the word fear because I'm not afraid, but I'm concerned that a central bank digital currency could be used not just to control the amount and the price of money, but it could also be used to control how we spend our money, where we spend our money, and who gets to spend their money. That's a real, deep felt worry with me. And right now we're seeing these strange passes being like issued, and you need to show them to go to restaurants, all that kind of stuff. And I could easily see a central bank digital currency being connected with that. So they would say, oh yeah, no, you haven't taken the right medical treatment, so you can't spend your money on a flight ticket, or all that kind of stuff. So this leads me to, I still think that the idea of central bank digital currency and the idea of central banks kind of creating money or having money creation being controlled in the public, I think that it still has merits, but I have the feeling that something else needs to happen first in order for this to work properly. And that leads me to this notion of sovereignty. So as I said before, freedom is something that we're given by systems. Sovereignty is different, because sovereignty is not something we've been given. To the extent we've been given sovereignty, it's something we've been given by life. Just by being alive, I'm sovereign. It's like part of my ontology now, to speak as a true philosopher. So just by being alive, I am sovereign. So systems, they can't take your sovereignty away. But what they can do is that they can make you forget that you're sovereign. And that happens all the time. So the political system, they can make you forget that the politicians, they're here to serve you, not the other way around. And they can also make you forget that we don't need politicians to tell us what's right or wrong. We can ask our hearts, we can ask our stomachs, and then we know what's right and wrong. We don't need politicians to tell us that. The same with the education systems. And maybe I'm sawing off my own branch here, but we don't need universities in order to think. every human being has the capacity to think. That's not to say that we can't learn more, but there's a tendency for us to think that we can only, we need these institutions in order to learn to think. That's not true. And as much as I like books, we also don't need books in order to think. We can think for ourselves, and then we can read books afterwards. But we need to kind of start from this. We need to remember that. I will say that some of the greatest free thinkers I've met in my life, they haven't set foot in the university. Some of them have, but I've also met some who haven't. So, and then another system or another, the health system. Also, I think we sometimes forget that our bodies have a power to heal itself. Our bodies can do tremendous things, but we tend to forget that when we kind of deposit, just like we deposit our money in the bank, we also deposit our natural healing abilities with the health system. So we think they are, and I don't think we need that. I mean, it can help us sometimes, but we need to start another place. We have our own immune system. We have our own sense of, am I ill or am I not ill? We don't need someone to, even something like our breath. We can do amazing things just with our breath. That is just part of our being. So anyway, and that takes me to the money system. I think we are, and it's very much also a mental thing, this sovereignty. That's where it starts. You need to kind of, yeah. I think the money system, one of the things that the money system that we have today has done is that it's kind of made us slaves to money and debt. And it gives us this feeling that we always owe something to someone or some system or something like that. And we don't. But basically, I mean, you're born into the world, you don't owe anyone anything. That's part of being sovereign. I like another economist I really like is Michael Hudson. And he has this saying that debts that can't be repaid will not be repaid. The question is, how will they not be repaid? And that, I think, is one of the key questions of the economy today. All these debts that we all know they're not going to be repaid. How are they not going to be repaid? And I think if people wake up, and that's happening, when people wake up to this sovereignty, they're just gonna say some of those debts, we're just not gonna pay it. We're just not gonna pay it. And speaking of waking up, that is actually what I'm seeing today. I see a lot of people. I think that's actually what is going on. I think that's one of the good things that is coming out of this crisis that we're in. We're being pressured. Is that people also be pushed to hard realizations, but then they're waking up. And it's a matter of politics and ideology, but it's also a matter of you could call it like a spiritual movement. I think discovering your own, waking up to your own sovereignty, that's a spiritual experience. So let me finish off here by returning to this issue of money and central bank digital currencies. So for me, before I can kind of support central bank digital currency, I think first we need to wake up as individuals and find out that we're not slaves of government, banks, central banks, all that. We don't have to fear all these institutions. And a lot of it, we don't really even need, because we're sovereign, right? And then I think once we kind of realize this, I think we're going to have, I think we should have, and I'm confident we are going to have. I think that's also one of the good things that's going to come out of the times that we live in now. I think we're going to have a deep discussion and possibly even a reform of our constitutions, because what I think we've seen over the past 2 years is that there are parts of our constitution that just do not work, and part of this conversation has to do with central banks. Joseph, he mentioned he used the phrase constitutional monstrosity, and I think what he was referring to was the fact that banks create money. I 100% agree with that. Yes, that's a constitutional monstrosity, but I will also add, I think central banks in their current form are also constitutional monstrosities. It's unsure, where do they belong in society? How are they related to democracy? Who runs them? What are the interests that they're pursuing? What is the BIS, for instance? Where does that come from? I never voted for August Carstens or all that kind of stuff. we need to look at that. And before we do that, it's difficult for me to kind of put my shoulders behind saying, yeah, let's give these shady institutions more power to create money. And then once we've sort of figured out what kind of central banks or what kind of monetary issuing, money issuing institution we want, then we can implement a central bank digital currency. And then I want to end by saying, this might sound like something that's like 50 years out into the future. I don't think that's the case. And I even think that some of the things many of the things that I'm saying right now is that if you know where to look, it's already happening. So I think we are moving towards a really, really bright future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ole. Excellent. Yes, that's a lot of good political, philosophical meat to digest, and I very much appreciate that. Some comments quickly. Of course, I hear in your appeal for people to be sovereign, you know, the old adagio of the Enlightenment that came from Immanuel Kant is dare to think for yourself. And out of that can come a very, of course, revolutionary way of saying, well, we need constitutions that are made by people that have that sense of sovereignty and have this sense of freedom of thought.
Yeah. And yeah,
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add, because I really like Kant and I really like this idea of thinking for yourself. However, I think one thing that Kant didn't understand is that he was focused on just thinking with your mind. What he didn't realize is that we can also think with our hearts. And that's what we need now. We need to think with our hearts, and we need to check out of fear and check into our hearts and love, and then we can move forward. That's my message. No more fear. Think with the heart.
No, I hear you. And I would add to that too, you know, the research and the deep thinking that came from Erich Fromm, the German Marxist, psychoanalyst, even Zen Buddhist. You know, he had the concept of freedom from restrictions, but also the idea of freedom to, where, you know, your inner creativity comes into play. And of course, you know, he had the quip that, you know, the moment people are free from something, they'll try to get rid of it. And that's kind of the crazy bind of humanity. They want to be free, but once they have it, they don't know necessarily what to do with it. And then they find another way to get rid of it. Concerning Richard Werner, I think he went a little into a darker corner than even what you think, because he thinks that the monetary reform movement has been co-opted by the banking system and by the central bank system. His reasoning is a little shaky, but he has made a pretty big, you know, break with the monetary reform movement. I hope you're not going that far.
No, I have a lot. I will say this. I have a lot of admiration for Richard, just because he's such an uncompromising free thinker. And then I also think, well, we can all think for ourselves. So some of the stuff that Richard says is brilliant. Some of it I'm maybe not, but I can contain all of it. And I think he's great. Yeah. So, but I get your point, Govert. Yeah.
No, it's you know, because one of the things that comes into play then also is the idea, and I have this from a civilizational thinker, Stephen K. Sanderson, who I very much admire, because he is thinking along world system analysis. He includes, you know, Toynbee and Spengler and comparative civilizational studies. And he is saying, like, well, let the whole system just, you know, implode. There's no way to reform it. It is inevitably going to, you know, some disaster. And even if you reform it, you'll just, you know, you make it last longer. So that's another pessimistic way to look at it. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that has been holding back sort of systemic change is exactly this idea that, oh, if all these systems collapses, then we can't do anything. That's how people who are not sovereign think. because they are dependent on the system. So in order for one system to kind of, they need another system. But I think what's happening right now is that we're waking up to a lot of new solutions. And I think a lot of the solutions that we need when the old systems break down, they're already there. So I don't think that, we have this gonna have this collapse and then we're all gonna eat like canned food and shoot each other and there's gonna be zombies. And I don't think that's gonna, but I think it's gonna be like not a smooth transition, but I think I see many of the solutions that we need, they're already there. They're already there. They just need to be turned on or boosted a little bit more. And I think that's going to happen like in a beautiful, like this one goes down and then this one goes up. I'm very confident.
Yeah, and for the last thing, I want to highlight then your idea that, and that's also coming from Richard Robbins and Tim DiMuzio, the idea of a debt strike. That of course people, they say Marx was not totally right to split the world between workers and capitalists, but at this moment it's a world of debtors versus creditors, and that the debtors of course have way more power than they realize. But they have to, unite. As Marx said, you can paraphrase it: debtors of the world unite. Yeah. And if they got that sense of power, we can force through a debt strike or through strategies developed based on a debt strike, we can force debt jubilees and other changes to the system that makes sense.
I agree with that, but I also do think that the change we're seeing right now, it's not one of. So Marx had this idea of this collective revolution where we would come together as a class and then do it. I think what's happening right now is that people individually are kind of waking up inside themselves. And then and I think this thing about debt strike, the first thing you need to get rid of is the debt that you have in your head. This idea that you owe something to, it's like this crazy idea that's been planted in our heads. We need to get rid of that and say, I don't owe anything to anyone. I'm sovereign. And once we do that, it's going to be very easy to go to the bank and say, sorry. So, yeah.
No, I hear you. Okay, we have a little bit left. I'll have Jeff pose a question, and then probably we'll leave it to Jeff. Maybe we can get Sue in, but we'll see. Jeff, keep it short, and I know you can.
Okay, hi, Ole. Yeah, I want to separate a bit from the philosophical for a moment and provide a more pragmatic solution to individual freedoms. So Progressive Money Canada has a proposal, and it empowers people to decide how the flow of money should be enacted. So if anybody's interested, they can see that video, Banking for a Better World. For example, you could get referendums by the people to actually vote how money should be put into the system. And then the Bank of Canada under that mandate would do that, say, for example, Medicare or whatever. So that actually does address the philosophical aspects that you're talking about with regards to personal freedoms. Because if everybody knows that if you don't have money, you really don't have any freedom, you're in a trap. Unfortunately, this is the way we move around. This is the way commerce occurs. For us to survive and be fulfilled, we need money, unfortunately. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Well, I think right now we're in a time where we need to come up with, that's also one way of changing this. One way is criticizing the old, another one is coming up with new solution. And just what I'm hearing from you say, I think that sounds like a brilliant solution. So it sounds like something I would be for. So I wouldn't be against that at all. I would say though that you say this thing that we need money in order to be free. That is true. But again, we shouldn't confuse freedom and sovereignty. And we sometimes do that. We get so caught up in trying to become free, like being rich or whatever it is, that we kind of forget that we're actually sovereign. So, and they don't, of course, they don't contradict each other. And when you're sovereign, yeah, then maybe you will need some money. But yeah, so, but I think it sounds like a great system. And yeah. And also, well, yes, yeah.
Again, trying to put that kind of semantic distinction aside, this will provide.
Wait. We need to keep pushing on. We're already behind.
We're
so
too sovereign here. We don't want that.
that's too sovereign. Yes, that's right.
No, there's one sovereign here, and that's
No, that's peace. I'm sorry, Sue. I know you are all ready. We have a special guest, but first,
let me just thank Ole Bjerg and just push the fact that, you know, if you want to get a little more philosophical about the money issue, this is really the 101 book to get into. And we could have another meeting about, you know, this philosophical stuff about freedom. And I thank you very much. This is a very
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure.
Think deeper on these issues and just to promote our profession. Well, it's not my profession, it's your profession. You know, we need philosophers in the social sciences to push certain concepts and overall frameworks. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dr. Bjerg. Appreciate it.
if this video was helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe for new video notifications. Please consider donating at monetary.org/donate. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at AMI Monetary or on our website